Amara lived in a small farming town where life moved slowly. She woke up before the sun, when the air was still cool, and the rooster's call echoed across the quiet fields. Her grandmother's old farm had a rhythm of its own, milking cows, feeding chickens, and planting vegetables. Amara worked with quiet patience, her hands used to the soil and her body strong from years of labor. She never complained. People who passed by the farm often saw her bending over rows of corn or carrying buckets of water with steady arms. To them, she was just another poor farm girl with no bright future. But there was more to her than anyone realized. Every morning after chores, Amara walked into town for school. She wore plain clothes, sometimes hand-sewn by her grandmother. She carried her books in an old canvas bag that had been patched several times. The other girls at school wore newer outfits, bright sneakers, and carried shiny backpacks. Some whispered and laughed when they saw her, and others openly called her farm girl. Amara never responded. She simply lowered her eyes and walked past them. Teachers admired her silence, thinking she was just shy, but her classmates mistook her quiet nature for weakness. Her grandmother, wise and gentle, often told her, "Child, the world will test you. People will judge you by what they see, but you must never let them know all that you carry inside." Amara listened. She knew her grandmother was right. What no one in town knew was that Amara had a secret. Behind her calm face and simple clothes was a strength hidden carefully, a strength her late father had passed on to her. Her father had once been a respected martial arts instructor. When Amara was very young, he taught her the basics of balance, breathing, and discipline. While other children played games, Amara practiced stances, kicks, and forms in the family barn. She didn't fully understand why her father insisted on training her, but she enjoyed the challenge. After his sudden death, Amara was devastated. Yet, she made a promise to continue practicing in his memory. Each dawn, while the world still slept, she trained in silence. The creak of the wooden floor beneath her feet, the sharp sound of her breath, and the steady rhythm of her movements kept her connected to her father. This was her private world, one that no one could take away. At school, things were different. Amara kept her head down. She focused on her studies and stayed away from trouble. But some classmates were determined to make her life harder. They teased her for smelling of the farm, for her rough hands, for the dirt under her fingernails. Boys laughed at her old shoes, and girls sneered when she sat alone at lunch. The teachers noticed but chose not to interfere, thinking the bullying was harmless. Amara endured it quietly, never once revealing her strength. She remembered her grandmother's words and her father's lessons: true power is not shown in anger but in patience. One boy, however, noticed her silence differently. Eli, a tall boy with kind eyes, often watched when others teased her. Unlike the rest, he didn't laugh. Sometimes, he even tried to walk beside her, though he didn't say much. He once helped her pick up her books when they were knocked to the ground by a careless bully. Amara gave him a small smile, grateful but still guarded. Eli could sense there was something unusual about her, but he couldn't place what it was. The town itself added to her isolation. It was a place where everyone knew everyone's business. Gossip traveled faster than the wind. People would whisper, "That poor girl works harder than any boy, yet she'll never escape the farm." Some admired her dedication, but others dismissed her as invisible. Amara didn't mind. She had learned to find comfort in silence. Yet deep down, she wondered how long she could continue enduring the cruelty without revealing the truth. One day, while walking home, a group of bullies blocked her path. They jeered, calling her names, mocking her clothes, and finally, one of them tipped over her basket of vegetables. Tomatoes rolled into the dirt, and carrots scattered across the road. People nearby glanced for a moment, then turned away. No one stepped in. Amara quietly bent down, gathering her vegetables, her hands steady though her heart was heavy. The bullies laughed louder, expecting her to cry. But she didn't. She calmly finished picking up the basket and walked away without a word. That silence unsettled them. It was not the reaction they expected. To them, it felt like she was unbothered, and that only fueled their anger more. At home, her grandmother noticed her quiet mood. "What happened, child?" she asked. Amara only shook her head. She didn't want to worry the old woman. Later that night, Amara stood in the barn, her body moving through practiced motions. Each punch, each kick, was precise. The memory of the bullies laughing echoed in her mind, but she pushed it aside. Her training wasn't about revenge, it was about control. Still, a small fire burned in her chest, one that grew brighter each time the bullies mocked her. As the days went on, the teasing didn't stop. In fact, it grew worse. The bullies whispered about planning something big, something to finally humiliate her in front of the entire school. Eli overheard a part of their plan and tried to warn her, but Amara only gave him a calm look. "It's all right," she said softly. But inside, she knew it was only a matter of time before she would be forced to reveal the side of herself no one knew existed. And so, the quiet farm girl continued her days working the fields, studying at school, and enduring the whispers. No one could have guessed that beneath her calm smile and patient silence was a storm waiting to be released. The bullies thought she was powerless. The town thought she was ordinary. Even Eli, who sensed something different, had no idea of the truth. But soon, everyone would see that the girl they mocked was far from weak. She was stronger than any of them could imagine, and when the time came, her hidden strength would change everything. The bullying did not stop after the day the bullies spilled Amara's basket of vegetables. In fact, it grew worse. For the bullies, silence was not enough. They wanted her to react, to cry, to fight, to lose. Every time Amara walked down the school hallway, they whispered loudly so she could hear. "Farm girl," they called her, or "vegetable seller." Some even wrinkled their noses, pretending she carried the smell of animals with her. Amara kept her eyes down and said nothing. But her silence seemed to make them even angrier. One afternoon in the cafeteria, the bullies came up with a cruel game. As Amara carried her tray to an empty table, one of them stretched out his foot and tripped her. The tray clattered to the ground, spilling food everywhere. Laughter filled the room. Students clapped and whistled as if it were a comedy show. Amara stood up calmly, her face expressionless. She bent down, picked up her tray, and walked to another table without saying a word. For a moment, the room went quiet. Her calmness was unusual, unsettling. But then, the bullies laughed even louder. Eli, who had been watching, clenched his fists. He wanted to stand up for her, but the bullies outnumbered him. He walked over quietly and whispered, "Are you okay?" Amara looked at him and gave a small nod. Her calmness was not weakness. But Eli could see a fire deep in her eyes, a fire no one else seemed to notice. Later that day, the bullies huddled together near the lockers. "She thinks she's too good to answer us," one said. "We'll make sure everyone sees what happens to her." They began plotting something bigger, an act that would humiliate her in front of the entire school. One boy suggested stealing her homework and blaming her for cheating. Another suggested pouring water on her in class. But the leader of the group wanted more. "We'll corner her after school," he said. "Let's see how calm she is then." That night, Amara returned home tired but not broken. Her grandmother saw the dirt on her uniform and asked softly, "Was it the same children again?" Amara hesitated, then nodded. Her grandmother sighed and touched her hand. "You know your strength. But remember, strength is not for showing off. Only for protecting what is right." Amara listened carefully. Those words echoed her father's teaching, too. She promised herself that she would not act unless it became truly necessary. The next morning, the tension was heavy in the air. Students whispered about the bullies' plan. Some even looked at Amara with pity, knowing she was about to be humiliated. Eli tried to warn her again. "They're planning something," he said as they walked to class. "Stay close to me." Amara smiled faintly. "Thank you, Eli," she said. "But I'll be all right." At lunch, the bullies tried another trick. They spilled juice on her books and laughed when the pages stuck together. Amara calmly wiped them down, not even looking at the group. This strange calmness spread a wave of unease through the cafeteria. A few students whispered, "Why doesn't she ever get mad? Why doesn't she fight back?" But the bullies only grew bolder. After school, as Amara left with her basket of vegetables for the market, the bullies followed her. Their leader smirked, confident that today she would finally break. They pushed her basket, scattering the vegetables again. "Pick them up, farm girl," one shouted. Amara crouched down, carefully collecting each piece of produce. Her silence made them laugh harder. Eli, who had followed at a distance, clenched his fists again, but he knew he couldn't fight 5 boys at once. What no one knew was that Amara was carefully watching, measuring each of their movements, noting their overconfidence. Her heart remained calm, her breath steady, just as her father had taught her. She remembered his words, "Control yourself first, then you can control the world around you." As the bullies walked away that day, one of them shouted, "Tomorrow after school we'll settle this once and for all." Amara lifted her eyes. For the first time, she allowed a faint smile to touch her lips. It was not the smile of fear. It was the smile of someone who knew her strength. That night in the barn, Amara trained longer than usual. Her kicks sliced the air, her fists struck the wooden post with precision, and her movements flowed like water. She wasn't training out of anger, she was preparing. She knew the bullies were planning something that could not be ignored. For years, she had kept her father's teachings hidden. But tomorrow, when the bullies tried to humiliate her once more, she might finally need to show the truth. The next morning, the entire school seemed to buzz with expectation. Whispers traveled quickly, "The farm girl is going to be in trouble today." Some students were excited to watch the scene. Others felt uneasy, wondering if the bullies had gone too far. Eli stayed close to Amara all day, worried about what was coming. But Amara's face was calm as always, her eyes steady, her steps measured. When the final bell rang, the bullies were waiting. They stood behind the gym, smirking and cracking their knuckles. A crowd of curious students gathered at a distance, eager to see what would happen. Amara walked toward them slowly, her basket in hand, her eyes steady. Eli stood at the edge of the crowd, his heart racing. The leader of the bullies stepped forward. "So, farm girl," he sneered, "you think you're better than us? Today you'll learn your place." The crowd went silent. Amara set her basket down gently, stood up straight, and looked directly at him. For the first time, her calm silence carried weight. The bullies felt something shift in the air, though they didn't understand what it was. The leader grinned and moved closer. "What will you do? Cry? Run? Beg?" he taunted. Amara's lips parted slightly, and she spoke in a calm voice for the first time in front of them, "I do not wish to fight. But if you force me, you will see who I really am." The crowd gasped. Eli's eyes widened. The bullies laughed, thinking it was another joke. But deep inside, Amara knew the moment she had avoided for so long had finally come. Tomorrow would not be about humiliation, it would be about truth. Amara's calm warning to the bullies hung in the air like an echo. The crowd behind the gym grew silent, unsure of what was about to happen. Some students smirked, thinking she was bluffing. Others leaned in, curious. Eli stood at the edge, his chest tight, because for the first time he felt that Amara was more than she appeared. The leader of the bullies laughed. "Look at her. She thinks she's dangerous." He motioned for one of the boys to shove her. The boy rushed forward, but what happened next startled everyone. Amara shifted her weight lightly, sidestepping with the ease of someone who had practiced it thousands of times. The boy stumbled past her, falling to the dirt. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Amara did not strike. She simply turned back, her posture calm, her breathing steady. The bullies exchanged uncertain looks. This wasn't normal. Something about the way she moved controlled, precise felt different. But their pride pushed them forward. Another boy lunged at her, swinging clumsy fists. In one smooth motion, Amara raised her arm, blocking his strike, and gently pushed him away. He staggered backward, clutching his wrist in shock. The students watching whispered loudly now. How did she do that? She's fast. Amara's heart pounded, but not from fear. She remembered her father's voice, do not fight in anger. Use your strength only when it is needed, and always with respect. She looked at the boys before her and said quietly, I do not want to hurt you. Leave me alone. But the leader refused to back down. His pride was too heavy. He rushed at her with full force, swinging wildly. For a brief moment, the crowd thought this was the end. But Amara stepped aside, swept her leg gently, and the leader crashed into the dirt with a loud thud. The crowd gasped, then burst into shocked murmurs. Eli's eyes widened with pride. For the bullies, the truth began to sink in. Amara wasn't weak. She wasn't defenseless. She moved like someone trained, like someone who had carried strength within her all along. At that moment, memories flooded Amara's mind. She was younger, standing barefoot in the barn, her father adjusting her stance. Balance, Amara, he said. You must feel the earth under your feet. The ground is your friend. Without balance, there is no strength. She remembered copying his movements, stumbling, then trying again until she stood firm. He had smiled, his eyes proud. Good. Remember, true martial arts is not about fighting. It is about knowing yourself. She remembered training at dawn, when mist rose above the fields. Her father taught her to breathe with the rhythm of the world, to move like the wind, to strike with the power of the earth, to defend with the calm of water. When he passed away, Amara cried in that same barn. Her grandmother had placed a hand on her shoulder and said, keep practicing. That is how you will keep him with you. So, every morning since, Amara practiced. She practiced not to show off, not to win applause, but to stay connected to her father's spirit. Each stance was a memory. Each strike was a lesson. That discipline lived inside her now, and it revealed itself in front of the bullies who thought she was powerless. The crowd at school could not believe their eyes. A girl they had mocked for so long was standing tall, steady, and strong. The bullies, one by one, backed away. Their leader, red-faced with both anger and embarrassment, shouted, "This isn't over." But his voice shook. Everyone could see the fear in his eyes. He grabbed his bag and stormed off, the others following behind him like shadows. For a moment, silence filled the space. Then whispers spread. "She's amazing. Where did she learn that? She made them look like fools." Students looked at Amara with new eyes. No one had expected the quiet farm girl to hold such skill. Eli stepped forward, smiling nervously. "I knew there was something about you," he said softly. Amara gave him a small nod, her eyes calm once again. She bent down, picked up her basket, and dusted off the vegetables that had fallen earlier. She did not brag, she did not smile with pride, she simply carried herself with quiet dignity. That evening, back at the farm, Amara's grandmother was waiting on the porch. She had already heard whispers from town. "So," she said gently, "you showed them today?" Amara nodded. "I didn't want to. But they left me no choice." Her grandmother smiled sadly. "I knew this day would come. Remember, child, your gift is not for proving yourself. It is for protecting your peace. Use it wisely." Amara looked toward the barn, where her father's training still lived in every wooden beam, every shadow. She whispered to herself, "I will." The next day at school, the atmosphere had shifted. Students who once laughed at her now looked at her with wide eyes. Some avoided her, unsure of how to approach her. Others whispered with admiration. The bullies kept their distance, embarrassed by their defeat. Amara walked through the halls with the same calm steps as always, but now the silence around her was different. It was no longer mocking, it was respect mixed with awe. Eli walked beside her, grinning. "You really surprised everyone," he said. "They won't bother you again." Amara looked at him and replied, "It was never about making them afraid. It was about ending it." But deep inside, Amara knew this was only the beginning. She had revealed a piece of herself, and the world would never see her as invisible again. The bullies had been silenced for now, but their wounded pride might not let them stay quiet forever. And Amara would have to decide how to continue balancing her life as a simple farm girl with the hidden strength of a martial artist. For the first time in years, she felt lighter. Her father's lessons had not been wasted. She had stood firm, not in anger, but in truth. And though the bullies had learned a painful lesson, it was the rest of the town who would remember that behind quiet faces, there can live extraordinary strength. The next day at school, the atmosphere was different. The story of Amara's quiet strength had already spread beyond the classrooms. Students whispered her name with a new kind of respect, while the bullies walked with stiff shoulders, pretending nothing had happened. But deep inside, their pride was hurt, and they couldn't bear that everyone now looked at them as weak. During recess, a group of students gathered near the gym where the showdown had happened. They replayed the scene with excited voices, some even imitating Amara's graceful movements. "She didn't even hit hard," one boy said. "She just moved, and they all fell." Another girl added, "It was like she knew what they would do before they did it." The bullies heard the whispers and grew restless. Their leader, Marcus, clenched his jaw. "We can't let her humiliate us again," he muttered to his friends. They agreed, though their eyes revealed the fear they still felt. Marcus's pride demanded revenge. He planned to strike back, not realizing that the more he tried, the deeper he would fall into his own shame. Amara, meanwhile, continued her routine as if nothing unusual had happened. She walked the hallways calmly, carried her basket home, and worked on the farm with her grandmother. But her grandmother noticed her thoughtful expression one evening. "What troubles you, child?" she asked as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset over the fields. Amara hesitated before answering. "They won't stop. I can feel it. They want to prove something." Her grandmother gave a knowing smile. "Then let them. Remember what your father taught you: true strength is not in destroying others, but in showing them who you are without anger. They will learn." The following week, the bullies finally made their move. Marcus challenged Amara openly in front of half the school. Behind the gym after classes, he shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let's see if the farm girl is really as strong as they say." Students cheered, eager for another spectacle. Some pitied Amara, thinking she would finally be overwhelmed. Others whispered with excitement, hoping to witness another shocking display. When the final bell rang, the crowd swelled behind the gym once again. Amara arrived quietly, her steps even and unhurried. She placed her basket down on the grass and looked at Marcus. Eli was there too, standing nervously at the edge, ready to step in if things got out of hand. Marcus stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "This time, I won't hold back," he sneered. He swung his fist clumsily at Amara, but she shifted aside smoothly, letting his own force carry him past her. He stumbled forward, nearly falling. Laughter broke out in the crowd. His face turned red with anger. Another boy tried to tackle her from behind, but Amara spun gracefully, her foot sweeping low. The boy's legs gave way, and he landed softly in the dirt. She hadn't hurt him, but the crowd gasped again at her control. Each move was precise, like a dancer who knew the rhythm before the music played. The bullies attacked together, hoping to overwhelm her. But Amara flowed between them, her body calm, her eyes sharp. She deflected a grab with her elbow, dodged a kick, and used one boy's weight to spin him aside. Each action was firm but gentle, never cruel. The more they fought, the clearer it became that she wasn't just strong, she was disciplined. The crowd roared in amazement. "She's unbeatable," someone shouted. "She moves like she's been training forever." The whispers turned into cheers, and for the first time, Amara's name was spoken with admiration instead of mockery. Marcus, panting and frustrated, made one last desperate charge. He raised his fists high, aiming to strike with all his strength. Amara waited calmly, her body still. At the last moment, she sidestepped, guided his arm down, and with a simple movement, placed him on the ground. The crowd gasped again, falling into silence. Amara stepped back, her breathing steady. She looked at Marcus, who lay on the ground, his pride shattered. "I told you," she said softly, her voice clear enough for all to hear. "I do not want to fight. But I will not be pushed down." The silence hung for a moment before the students erupted into cheers. Eli smiled proudly, clapping loudly. Marcus and his gang crawled away in shame, avoiding the stares of the crowd. They would not forget this day, and neither would anyone else. Amara bent down, picked up her basket, and walked away quietly. She didn't wave, she didn't boast. She simply left with dignity, her head held high. That calm exit made an even greater impact than her skill. She had not fought to win. She had only defended her peace. That night, at the farm, Eli visited. He stood awkwardly at the gate, holding a small bag of apples. "These are from my family's orchard," he said shyly. I just wanted to say you were amazing." Amara smiled gently and invited him to sit. Together, they watched the stars rise. For the first time, Amara felt like she wasn't completely alone. Someone understood her strength, not as a weapon, but as part of who she was. Her grandmother watched from the window, her heart full of quiet pride. She knew the world had begun to see what she had always known, that Amara carried within her not only the strength of her father's teaching but also the grace of true discipline. The bullies had been silenced, the crowd had been awakened, and Amara's story was just beginning. The next day at school, the atmosphere was different. The story of Amara's quiet strength had already spread beyond the classrooms. Students whispered her name with a new kind of respect, while the bullies walked with stiff shoulders, pretending nothing had happened. But deep inside, their pride was hurt, and they couldn't bear that everyone now looked at them as weak. During recess, a group of students gathered near the gym where the showdown had happened. They replayed the scene with excited voices, some even imitating Amara's graceful movements. "She didn't even hit hard," one boy said. "She just moved, and they all fell." Another girl added, "It was like she knew what they would do before they did it." The bullies heard the whispers and grew restless. Their leader, Marcus, clenched his jaw. "We can't let her humiliate us again," he muttered to his friends. They agreed, though their eyes revealed the fear they still felt. Marcus's pride demanded revenge. He planned to strike back, not realizing that the more he tried, the deeper he would fall into his own shame. Amara, meanwhile, continued her routine as if nothing unusual had happened. She walked the hallways calmly, carried her basket home, and worked on the farm with her grandmother. But her grandmother noticed her thoughtful expression one evening. "What troubles you, child?" she asked as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset over the fields. Amara hesitated before answering. "They won't stop. I can feel it. They want to prove something." Her grandmother gave a knowing smile. "Then let them. Remember what your father taught you: true strength is not in destroying others, but in showing them who you are without anger. They will learn." The following week, the bullies finally made their move. Marcus challenged Amara openly in front of half the school. Behind the gym after classes, he shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. Let's see if the farm girl is really as strong as they say. Students cheered, eager for another spectacle. Some pitied Amara, thinking she would finally be overwhelmed. Others whispered with excitement, hoping to witness another shocking display. When the final bell rang, the crowd swelled behind the gym once again. Amara arrived quietly, her steps even and unhurried. She placed her basket down on the grass and looked at Marcus. Eli was there too, standing nervously at the edge, ready to step in if things got out of hand. Marcus stepped forward, puffing out his chest. This time, I won't hold back, he sneered. He swung his fist clumsily at Amara, but she shifted aside smoothly, letting his own force carry him past her. He stumbled forward, nearly falling. Laughter broke out in the crowd. His face turned red with anger. Another boy tried to tackle her from behind, but Amara spun gracefully, her foot sweeping low. The boy's legs gave way, and he landed softly in the dirt. She hadn't hurt him, but the crowd gasped again at her control. Each move was precise, like a dancer who knew the rhythm before the music played. The bullies attacked together, hoping to overwhelm her. But Amara flowed between them, her body calm, her eyes sharp. She deflected a grab with her elbow, dodged a kick, and used one boy's weight to spin him aside. Each action was firm but gentle, never cruel. The more they fought, the clearer it became that she wasn't just strong, she was disciplined. The crowd roared in amazement. She's unbeatable, someone shouted. She moves like she's been training forever. The whispers turned into cheers, and for the first time, Amara's name was spoken with admiration instead of mockery. Marcus, panting and frustrated, made one last desperate charge. He raised his fists high, aiming to strike with all his strength. Amara waited calmly, her body still. At the last moment, she sidestepped, guided his arm down, and with a simple movement, placed him on the ground. The crowd gasped again, falling into silence. Amara stepped back, her breathing steady. She looked at Marcus, who lay on the ground, his pride shattered. I told you, she said softly, her voice clear enough for all to hear. I do not want to fight. But I will not be pushed down. The silence hung for a moment before the students erupted into cheers. Eli smiled proudly, clapping loudly. Marcus and his gang crawled away in shame, avoiding the stares of the crowd. They would not forget this day, and neither would anyone else. Amara bent down, picked up her basket, and walked away quietly. She didn't wave, she didn't boast. She simply left with dignity, her head held high. That calm exit made an even greater impact than her skill. She had not fought to win. She had only defended her peace. That night, at the farm, Eli visited. He stood awkwardly at the gate, holding a small bag of apples. These are from my family's orchard, he said shyly. I just wanted to say you were amazing. Amara smiled gently and invited him to sit. Together, they watched the stars rise. For the first time, Amara felt like she wasn't completely alone. Someone understood her strength, not as a weapon, but as part of who she was. Her grandmother watched from the window, her heart full of quiet pride. She knew the world had begun to see what she had always known, that Amara carried within her not only the strength of her father's teaching but also the grace of true discipline. The bullies had been silenced, the crowd had been awakened, and Amara's story was just beginning. Thought for 12s the days after the second showdown felt softer, like the air after a heavy rain. At school, people no longer pointed or laughed when Amara walked by. They watched her with a quiet respect that surprised even the teachers. Some students smiled at her in the hallway. Others simply moved aside and gave her room, as if they finally understood that silence was not weakness, it was a choice. Amara did not change her walk, her clothes, or her calm face. She still carried her canvas bag with patched corners. She still ate lunch by the window. But something in the way the world looked at her had shifted. She was not invisible anymore. On Saturday morning, Amara went to the town market with her grandmother. The sun sat low and friendly in the sky. Their stall held neat rows of vegetables, jars of honey, and fresh eggs. A little girl came by with her mother and asked, "Are you the farm girl who moved like a dancer?" Amara smiled and nodded. The girl whispered, "You were brave," and then picked out a shiny apple. Amara's grandmother watched with warm eyes. "The town is learning," she said softly. A few stalls away, Eli helped his father sell apples and pears. When he finished, he walked over with a small paper bag. "For you," he said shyly. "Best apples we have." Amara thanked him and placed the bag beside the eggs. They talked for a while about ordinary things: weather, homework, chores. It felt good to talk about simple life again. There was no need to speak of the gym or the crowd or the boys who used to tease her. The quiet between their words was easy. But the story had not ended for everyone. Marcus and his friends carried heavy hearts now. Pride had chained them for a long time, and breaking free was not simple. On Sunday afternoon, Marcus sat on the church steps after service, staring at his hands. His older brother sat beside him and said, "Being strong does not mean being loud. It means knowing when to stop." Marcus listened without answering. He remembered how Amara had looked at him, not with anger, not with shame, but with a kind of sad respect. That look stayed with him like a mirror. On Monday, the principal called an assembly. The whole school gathered in the auditorium. The hum of whispers rose and fell like waves. The principal spoke first. He talked about kindness, dignity, and how a school is a home for everyone. Then, to the surprise of many, he invited Amara to the stage, along with Marcus and his friends. A hush fell over the room. Amara stood under the lights with steady shoulders. Marcus stood several steps away, eyes lowered. The principal said, "We are here to learn from what happened. Not to judge, but to learn." Then he stepped aside. Amara took a slow breath. "I do not want to be famous," she began in a gentle voice. "I only want to be safe and to study in peace. I do not want to fight. My father taught me to move with calm, not to harm. When you insult someone, you do not see their story. You do not know what they carry in their heart. We all want to be seen kindly." Her words were simple, but they landed like seeds in soft soil. She turned to Marcus and his friends. "I hope we can start again. Not as enemies. Just as people who go to the same school." The room was so quiet that even the projector's tiny fan could be heard. Marcus looked up at last. His face changed a little, as if a door opened inside. He nodded, stepped forward, and spoke in a plain voice that carried to the back row. "I am sorry," he said. "We were wrong." One by one, his friends echoed the same words. A few students began to clap. Then more. The sound grew until the whole room was filled with it. Not the clapping people do for a show, but the kind they do when they feel something true and hopeful. Eli clapped too, his hands steady, his eyes bright. After the assembly, the counselor asked Amara if she would consider leading a short after-school club about balance, focus, and calm breathing, not martial arts for winning, but simple movements for everyday confidence and safety. Amara thought of her father. She thought of her grandmother's words, "Strength is for protecting peace." She agreed, but only with clear rules. On a whiteboard, she wrote 5 promises for the club: breathe first, speak second. Never start a fight. Protect your dignity and the dignity of others. Walk away when you can. Be humble, always. Kids from different grades came to the first session, some shy, some excited. Even 2 of the boys who once teased her stood in the doorway, unsure if they should enter. Amara waved them in without a speech. She taught the group how to stand with both feet grounded, how to place their hands gently by their sides, how to feel the breath move in and out like a tide. She taught them to turn the shoulders softly, to step forward and back with balance. The room was quiet, but not heavy. The quiet felt like a friend. At the end of the session, a small boy whispered, "I feel taller on the inside." Amara smiled. That was exactly the point. Outside of school, life continued as it always had. There were still animals to feed, seeds to plant, and fences to mend. But now, people greeted Amara and her grandmother more warmly at the market. The librarian saved a new reading list for her. The art teacher asked if she would pose for a still life drawing with the basket she always carried. And when Amara walked home in the afternoon, the path felt brighter. One evening, Eli visited the farm again, carrying a book on breathing and focus he had borrowed from the library. They sat in the barn where the old wooden beams held the scent of hay and dust. Amara showed him a corner where she kept a small box with her father's notes, short sentences, drawn arrows, simple reminders: stand like a tree. Move like water. Do not let anger drive the body. Eli read them with quiet wonder. Did you write anything of your own? He asked. Amara hesitated, then pulled out a folded paper where she had written in careful letters, "Strength is not loud. Strength is clear." Eli nodded as if he had found a treasure. In the weeks that followed, Marcus and his friends kept to themselves, but not in a dark way. They helped the janitor carry tables before assemblies. They returned a stack of books that had been left scattered in the hallway. One afternoon, they showed up at the club, not to take part in every exercise, but to learn the breathing. "It helps before tests," one of them said, almost embarrassed. Amara nodded and showed them a simple count: in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. She made no mention of the past. She did not need to. The principal noticed the change in the school. He started a kindness week, but not the noisy kind with big posters and loud slogans. Instead, teachers shared stories of small courage: a door held open, a seat offered, a harsh word softened. In homeroom, a girl raised her hand and said, "The farm girl taught us that peace can be strong." The class fell into a thoughtful silence, and then they began to share their own examples. At home, Amara's grandmother tended seedlings by the window. "You have planted more than vegetables this year," she told Amara. "You have planted a way of seeing." Amara wrapped her arms around her grandmother with gentle care. "I only did what you and father taught me," she said. Her grandmother's smile held a lifetime of weathered mornings and hopeful afternoons. As spring warmed into summer, the town held a small festival in the school yard: music from a local band, pies from the bakery, and boxes of fruit from Eli's family orchard. Amara and her grandmother brought baskets of tomatoes and jars of golden honey. Children from the club set up a tiny corner under a tree where they taught anyone who wished how to stand still and breathe. Even the mayor tried it, laughing softly at first, then falling quiet as he stood with his eyes closed and his feet steady. When the sun began to set, the sky turned to peach and lavender. Eli and Amara walked the edge of the field where the grass met the school fence. "Do you ever wish people had never teased you?" Eli asked. Amara thought for a moment. "No," she said at last, gently. "Without those days, we would not have learned this lesson. And now we know it together." They stopped by the fence. The air smelled of cut grass and warm earth. The music from the festival drifted toward them, soft and friendly. Amara looked at the horizon, where the first stars waited to appear. She remembered her father guiding her hands, she remembered her grandmother's voice like a lantern in the night. She felt her breath move in and out, steady and strong. In that quiet moment, the story settled into its true shape. The bullies had not been destroyed, they had been changed. The town had not been shocked for entertainment, it had been opened for understanding. And Amara had not won a contest, she had protected her peace and shared it with others. She picked up her basket, light in her hands now, and turned toward the lights of the festival. Eli walked beside her. The path under their feet was the same path it had always been, but it felt new because the people walking it had changed. And that was the gentle truth Amara carried forward: real strength is not about showing power. Real strength is discipline, kindness, and the quiet courage to stand with dignity so that everyone, even those who once mocked, can find their own better steps. The stars came out, one by one, as if clapping softly for the lesson learned. And the farm girl, no longer